Hey everyone, Robert Ferringo of Doc Sports here with your college football opening line report for week 2 of the college season. Be sure to go to docsports.com for all your sports handicapping needs and click on that link down below in the description to get $60 free, same as cash, to be used at Doc Sports towards any handicapper, any package, for any sport that you want. So I apologize that our opening line report is a little late because of the holiday. Sorry, got to spend a little time with the wife and the kids over the weekend, and there was a lot of football watching and lounging by the pool. But it's back to work. Week 1 of the NFL, week 2 of college football. So we are full throttle, full steam ahead from now until February, from now until the Super Bowl, really. Football season, we've been waiting for it, talking about it for months. It is back in full effect, really. Also, which reminds me, we still have our 3-for-1 deal at Doc Sports, and we still have our early bird special on our full season football package. What that is the early bird is $749, gets you the full season of any handicapper that you want. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip here. If you use that free 60 below, you can apply that towards the $749. So you could get a full season of any handicapper that you want. I'm not trying to steer you anyway, but I have had 4 straight winning weeks here to start the season, including a winning week last week. But you could get a full season of my picks for less than $700. Okay, I've done the math on it. It works out to like $25 a week, something like that. When you consider that weekly top games are $30 a week per handicapper, I mean, it really is a steal to sign up for the long term. We haven't changed our prices in the 20 years that I've been here, so it's been more than 20 years. So, all right. But you didn't, and the 3-for-1. So if you sign up for my picks, you can pick 2 other handicappers and get their packages to test drive for like 2 or 3 weeks as well. Let's say you don't want to stick with me. I have too many plays, somebody else is hotter, something like that. You can jump around to whoever you want. So, all right. House cleaning out of the way. Let's get into the lines for week 2 in college football. Now, I'm not going to go through every single spread on the board, although I do go through a good, healthy majority of them. But for instance, there's 2 games on Thursday, 2 games on Friday, but most of them are schlubby games. The only one that kind of jumped out at me here was James Madison at Louisville. Little bit of a reverse line movement here. Obviously, 2/3 of the action is coming in on the host Cardinals, but this number has moved from James Madison plus 15 to plus 14. Little bit of a surprise to me that the number is where it is. Are we undervaluing this Cardinals team? We'll find out. We'll find out if they can beat a team that obviously they're supposed to. And I'm sorry, I said this was a Thursday night game. This is a Friday night game. No college on Thursday because obviously the NFL opener and they want to hog the spotlight. So this is a Friday night primetime game. James Madison plus 15 at Louisville. All right, get into Saturday's action. Florida International plus 42 at Penn State. Penn State did not cover last week at, what were they, plus 43.5, plus 44 against Nevada. I released that as one of my rated plays. Just betting against the offseason hype against Penn State. Will they turn around and will they cover this game against FIU? I won my bet against them last week with Nevada. I don't know if I'm going to be in a hurry to bet against them again. This number's at 42. Do you think that the Nittany Lions are still overvalued, or do you think they can get past this number? All right, we have an ACC, kind of an interesting ACC matchup kicking off at noon as well, and that's Virginia at NC State, okay? Virginia plus 2.5. They're coming off a very good-looking 48-7 blowout win over Coastal Carolina. NC State, they played East Carolina last Thursday, if you remember. They were a 13.5-point favorite, so they didn't cover. They were up 17-0 in that game. They had a chance to really curb stomp East Carolina, but the Pirates, they're always really good in the underdog role in that series. They were able to claw their way back and make that a game. So Virginia and NC State both 1-0, both with wins. ACC opener for both of them. Virginia hasn't won in this series since 2012. NC State is actually 5-1 straight up, 4-2 against the spread in this series going back to 2007. However, the underdog is 5-1 against the spread. Virginia, small underdog. Kind of interesting here that they're not giving you the full 3 points at home on NC State. This is year 4 for Tony Elliott. Is Virginia a team that's going to make a jump? Was last week's game a little bit of an aberration, beating Coastal Carolina? One of these two teams is going to be 2-0 and have a little bit of momentum heading towards conference play. All right, big theme of the week this week is how do teams handle success and failure? There were a lot of primetime games, a lot of big games, a lot of marquee games last week, and we had winners and losers. Okay, how do those teams respond the following week? And right here is a perfect example. San Jose State is plus 36.5 at Texas. How does Texas respond? Now, you don't need me to tell you what you saw out of Arch Manning. He was awful. He was awful. He was bad. Okay, and they really weren't even very close in that game against Ohio State. What are they going to do? What's Texas going to do? Are they going to rebound? Are they good enough to rebound? Are they still overrated, overvalued? Is it not just Arch that we kind of gave too much hype to? Is it this Texas team, which, you know, as I talked about in other videos, the sportsbook took more money on Texas to win the national championship than just about every other team, almost every other team combined. Not quite that much, but more than half of all the action, or right around half of all the action that came in on teams to win the national championship came in on Texas. And then they went out and looked like that. Not great. Now, San Jose State was a team that kind of overachieved last year. They were supposed to be like kind of a dark horse in the Mountain West this season. They lost to Central Michigan as 14-point favorites in their last game. So this number's sitting around 36.5, 37. Is Texas good enough to just go out and lay the wood, go out, get a 45, 50-point win, and kind of put everyone back at ease? Or, you know, maybe San Jose State was looking past Central Michigan and looking ahead to this game with Texas, and maybe they will be kind of a feisty underdog, and Texas will go 0-2 against the spread to start the season. All right, big game in Conference USA. Also at noon, we have Liberty -6 at Jacksonville State. Again, Jacksonville State, one of those teams that completely rebuilt, retooled their entire team. They've been playing all right so far, but this is a big conference game for them. And if Liberty can get a road win to start off conference play, that'll bode well for them, laying less than a touchdown. All right, Central Michigan plus 21.5 at Pittsburgh. Bowling Green plus 21.5 at Cincinnati. The MAC went 7-6 against the spread last week. 7-5 if you don't count UMass, who was a new MAC member, a new old MAC member. So the MAC was actually pretty good. They covered in a lot of kind of like high-profile spots. Really just the drag teams were the ones that lost for them. So it was a pretty good weekend for the MAC last week. Are they going to be able to do it again against two teams, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, both Central Michigan and Bowling Green, respectively, catching just over 21 points, just over 3 touchdowns. All right, the Cy-Hawk game. Iowa +3 at Iowa State. Big game for two really, really good teams. Iowa State looked great again last week. Rocco Becht, no ill effects from the Ireland trip. They got an easy blowout win against a pretty good FCS school. Obviously not looking ahead to this Iowa game. What are we going to see? Iowa, they scored 34 points in their first game against Albany. Weren't able to cover against a 39-point line, but, you know, they made it look a little easier than Iowa has a tendency to in these games. And this is a big-time underdog series. The underdog has, covered 7 of the last 10 meetings. Plenty of outright wins. They've alternated wins and losses in this rivalry series over the last 4 years. However, Iowa is 7-2 straight up in this series, dating back to 2015. So huge game. It's a big noon kickoff game for Fox. I don't think it's going to be very aesthetically pleasing. These games between Iowa and Iowa State usually never are. I mean, last year the total was 36.5. They went under, 5 straight years prior to that, including going under against a 35-point total. So don't expect fireworks here from these two teams, but the outcome of this game is relatively important for both of these teams and their resumes as they try and build towards putting together something to make the playoffs, probably as at-large bids. Okay, next we have Connecticut +7 at Syracuse. Syracuse, my 7-unit play last week, which I won, was on Tennessee going against Syracuse. But I gotta admit, Syracuse looked a little better than I thought they would. I think I had that score as like 45-17, 45-13, 42-13, right in that area. It was 45-26. And it was actually 38-26 with about a little over 11 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. So Syracuse just kind of hung around in that game. Too many mistakes, got pushed around too much. In the first half, I think Tennessee was averaging 8 yards a rush. But Syracuse is home now. I like Fran Brown. I like what he was doing on the sidelines last week. I think he's a really good coach, and the Syracuse team might be a little bit better, a little bit more competitive than I thought they were going to be. But they still lost and didn't cover, and I won my 7-unit wager last week. So, see ya. Connecticut, also very good, very tough, Jim Mora-led team. Really good underdog. They were a 10-point underdog last year at the Dome, and they only lost 31-24, so they covered last year, and they're facing a spread +7 that's equivalent to their loss last year. I think this is a worse Syracuse team. Even though they outperformed my expectations and looked a little better than what I was expecting, they're still not as good as last year. They're not going to be as good as last year. Is this Connecticut team a little bit better than last year? Are they capable of pulling an upset? Are they capable of throwing a scare into Syracuse? Does Syracuse have a letdown? Did they expel a lot of energy physically and mentally going to Atlanta to take on that SEC opponent? So kind of a sneaky game there as well. Another game that I'm going to have my eye on is this Baylor at SMU. Now, you would think that these two, because they're two non-marquee Texas schools, that you would have thought that they had played a bunch, that they would have kind of a regular series. No, this is the first meeting since 2016. Now, Baylor did go 4-0 in this series between 2012 and 2016, but they haven't played in 10 seasons. SMU ho-hummed their way to a 42-13 win over an FCS walkover last week. What's interesting about this game is that Baylor is just +2.5. This is another one of those instances where the books aren't giving you the full 3 points for the home team. And the majority of the action is on Baylor. Around 70% of the early action is on the Bears here in this game, after the Bears just got rolled as a home dog against Auburn. Again, this was a Baylor team that Dave Aranda, he's got to kind of do something, like piss or get off the pot type of thing this year. He has an experienced team. He has an experienced quarterback. He's got a quality team. He kind of needs this win. If he goes 0-2 to start the season, then the knives are going to come out around that Baylor program. So big game for both teams. Another very interesting line is Illinois. Okay, top 15 Illinois. They are -3 on the road at Duke. Just -3. And that number is holding firm despite the fact that 83% of the early action is on Illinois. Everybody and their sister is on Illinois. They're ranked number 11 in the AP Top 25, 12 in the coaches poll. They're only 3-point favorites on the road against Duke. Now, Illinois did look good. They won 52-3 against Western Illinois. Who cares? Duke won but didn't cover against Elon. Does Manny Diaz have some tricks up his sleeve? This one looks like the public walking into something right here with the majority of that action on Illinois, but that number holding firm at just -3 for a top 12 team, against the ACC, who kind of held their own last week. All right, I keep saying interesting. These are interesting. This is why you're watching, because you want info on this, on these college football lines, and just fascinating stuff all over the place. Yes, because I'm a gambler, but just in general. Okay, Kennesaw State, the next one. Kennesaw State +35 at Indiana. What is interesting about that? What is so fascinating about that? Anybody that watched any of the videos last week knows that I was on Old Dominion +24 against Indiana. Another winner that I hit, going completely against the public. Indiana was an ATM machine last year. Okay, just paying out tickets every single week. Coming into the season, they still had a lot of hype. They're still a very good team. But were they going to cover this year at the same rate that they were last year? Can Kirk Cignetti keep covering the spread? His teams, again, James Madison before and Indiana last year at around 75%? I don't think so. Okay, now they didn't cover last week against Old Dominion, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I think they had 12 possessions. I think 11 of them went past half field. A couple turnovers, missed field goals, stopped on downs, just couldn't put it together. Still won easily, but just couldn't cover that inflated line. Is this line inflated? Kennesaw State +35 on the road. Is Indiana going to cover the spread? Because I know the public is going to be on Indiana. Should they be? Kennesaw State, one of those teams, new head coach, taken over there. They're one of those teams that's transitioning from, they've run the option/pistol offense the last 7 years. It's the only offense they've run at Kennesaw State since that program's been founded. They're switching it up, going to a little bit more of a traditional spread attack. So they're in transition. So it's going to be interesting to see if Indiana can, harken back to 2024 and put up 58 points and easily cover this number. Or is Kennesaw State a little better than we thought? Is Indiana a little worse than we thought? How's that going to play out? All right, next game is conference game. We have Mississippi, Ole Miss -10 at Kentucky, 3:30. True SEC road game for the Rebels, who hung 70 points. And that's just Lane Kiffin being Lane Kiffin. He has no problem kicking somebody while they're down and running the score up on somebody. But, he did that to start last year. And then I don't know if anybody remembers what happens. They were number 7, 6. They were top 10 in the country. And they lost at home as a huge favorite to this Kentucky game. So that makes this like a true-ass revenge game for Ole Miss. But they are laying double digits, laying 10 points at Kentucky. Kentucky escaped against Toledo. They won by 8 points. So where you bet that game, if you get it at 8.5, you want it to hook. I think that number came down around 7.5, 8 before lurching back up to 10. So, those people that say it doesn't matter when you bet a game, it absolutely does, especially in college football where the line movements are a lot more pronounced than the NFL. But Kentucky did not cover last week. Next game, we have Kansas +6 at Missouri. The border war. Big, big, big rivalry between these two schools going back a very, very long time. However, these two teams haven't played since 2011. That's the last time that these two teams played in football. They play all the time in college basketball in the border war. So this game is going to be amped up. We have Kansas +6 at Missouri. Kansas, maybe it's a benefit, maybe it doesn't. I don't have the numbers right in front of me on how teams playing their third game in 3 weeks to start the season fare against teams playing only their second game. Missouri rolled 61-6 over its FCS opponent. Kansas, they hammered Fresno State, then they won 46-7 last week against Wagner. Didn't cover the spread. Depending on where you got it, if you got a good number, if you got it before it crossed over the 39, then Kansas is 7-1 against the spread in their last 8 games. Even with that loss, they're still 6-2 against the spread. Kansas has been pretty good. Missouri, they just keep ho-humming their way to kind of the second tier, the bottom of the second tier maybe in the SEC. Big chance to get a statement win for their conference and for their program against a rival. So it'll be interesting to see if that number comes down, goes up throughout the season. All right, next we have Miami of Ohio +14.5 at Rutgers. I bring this game up because last week Rutgers didn't cover basically the same number against Ohio. This is back-to-back MAC opponents. They didn't cover last week. They barely won that game, 34-31 against Ohio as a 14.5-point favorite. They're 14.5-point favorites again here against Miami of Ohio. Can Rutgers put a little better performance together in this game? It will also give us an idea of some relative strength between Ohio and Miami of Ohio, giving kind of an apples-to-apples comparison against a common opponent. Next, we have Oklahoma State at Oregon. And I'm not going to lie, when I wrote up my Week 2 bets in the summer, looking past Week 1 to Week 2, where I thought numbers were going to be and what games were on my radar, Oklahoma State was definitely on my radar. I was ready to bet Oklahoma State plus, I think I had them +27. +26.5, +27, right in that ballpark range against Oregon. So this number did not surprise me even a little bit. Now, I made this mistake last week. During the summer, when I was writing up numbers, I wrote up Florida State in Week 1 over Alabama. Not for the upset, just against the spread. I thought 2 touchdowns in a true road game was too much for Alabama to lay. Then during the summer, Tommy Castellano started running his mouth about Alabama, and I was like, ooh, bad idea. And I let that little nugget taint my initial handicapping. And not only did it get me off Florida State, but it got me on to Alabama. That was a mistake last week. Very similar situation here for me personally. During the summer, I liked Oklahoma State. Okay, I'm kind of buying into Mike Gundy this year. I've said this before. He's only had 2 losing seasons in his entire career. His very first season at Oklahoma State and last year. One of these teams that brought in 60 transfers, ton of transfers. Kicked everybody to the curb last week. So I'm willing to buy low on Gundy, a guy who's kind of a proven winner. He's been a phenomenal underdog coach in his career. I'm not as high on Oregon this season. So, I think that this is a high value situation. Then we get to this week. And this week, Gundy starts running his mouth about the Oregon program and how much money they spent and how Oklahoma State's only spent $7 million over the last 3 years and Oregon spent $40 million and blah, blah, blah. Well, that elicited a response from Dan Lanning, the head coach of Oregon, who was kind of like, keep our name out your mouth. So that kind of got me a little spooked that maybe Lanning and Oregon want to send a little bit of a message. Maybe this is a game that they didn't really have a reason to get up for. It's kind of why I liked Oklahoma State getting all those points. I was like, Oregon doesn't care about this game. This isn't a huge game for them. They have that Penn State game coming up in just a couple of weeks. I could see them looking past Oklahoma State. Now I think they have Oregon's attention. Oregon won 59-13 last week against Montana State. Is Montana State better than Oklahoma State? I don't know. Kind of a legit question. Oklahoma State did not look good against UT Martin last week, only winning 27-7. That doesn't bother me. Maybe they're playing possum. Maybe they didn't want to put things on tape with so many new players. Maybe they were just knocking the rust off. Make whatever excuse you want to about Oklahoma State not covering last week. They won by 20. That line opened at 20.5, 21. By kickoff, it was 27.5, one of the big movers last week. Here's the thing that bothers me about Oklahoma State last week. They only averaged 3 yards per carry against Tennessee Martin. Not great. You can't physically push around an FCS team. What are you going to do against Oregon's defensive front seven? What are you going to do against their pass rush? What are you going to do against Oregon's running game? If you're not physically strong enough to manhandle Tennessee Martin, I don't know how you're going to hold up for 60 minutes in Autzen against Oregon. All right, next game, West Virginia at Ohio. Is West Virginia on upset alert here? Okay, 80%, around 80% of the action in this game is coming in on the Mountaineers, but the line's moving the other way. Okay, kind of leaning towards Ohio. As I mentioned, Ohio only lost by 3 points last week against Rutgers. They are at home. This is a true home game for the Bobcats. They don't draw many Power 4 conference teams into Ohio University. All right, so you know that this is one that they had circled before the season even started. Now, West Virginia, Rich Rod looked good. They rolled over Robert Morris 45-3. This is another one of those games, kind of like that Illinois game, where I feel like the books are baiting public action. And to this point, it's working. 80% are on the Mountaineers. Does Rich Rod already have it rolling? He brought all those transfers over from Jacksonville State. Is this a spread that we're going to look back on a few weeks or months from now and be like, man, how's West Virginia not laying double digits there in Ohio? Or are they going to get beat? That's why they play the games, right? All right, South Florida plus 17 at Florida, 4 o'clock game in Gainesville. South Florida, they came through for me last week as a 5-unit winner. I had them plus 6.5 against Boise State. They thumped Boise State. I think it was 34-7. They won outright. So easy winner for me. Now they're catching 17 points at Florida. Now Florida looked good last week. They beat Long Island as 55-0, as they should. DJ Lagway looked healthy, looked good. He's now 7-0 as a starter. Who's Florida? What's Florida? They've been great going back towards the second half of last season until now. What's South Florida? Did they just catch Boise State, a team that's kind of struggled early on in the season, especially on the road? Is that kind of one of those week 1 fluke games? Or does Alex Galesh have his best team? Is he ready to throw a scare into a team like Florida? Is 17 points too many? That'll be a game to watch what that line does this week. All right, next we have North Carolina at Charlotte. 7 o'clock game. Kind of like with the Arch Manning thing, right? Like, you don't need to tell me what happened in North Carolina. You all saw it. Everybody's talking about it. You don't need me to, deep dive into it. It was bad, and really it should have been worse. Josh Hoover was not good in the first half. He probably left 2 touchdowns on the field in the first half. Probably should have been 34-7 at halftime, and TCU probably should have hung 60 on North Carolina. They are going on the road. This is another one of those instances where a small conference team gets a Power 4 conference team in their home stadium. So North Carolina, 14-point road favorite at Charlotte. Game that you know Charlotte's going to be way up for. Charlotte, new head coach Tim Albin. They did not look good either last week, losing 34-11 against Appalachian State. It is going to be a long year in Charlotte. But, you know, who's buying North Carolina right now after what happened to them on Monday Night Football? Are these 2 touchdowns them being overrated still with the Belichick effect? Or are we underrating how bad Charlotte is? So that's going to be another one to watch. Next, we have Army plus 17 at Kansas State. Now, this one drives me a little nutty because I knew that at least one of the 2 teams that played in Ireland in week 0 were not going to cover the spread. You remember that big Iowa State, Kansas State game? Came down to the final minutes, 24-21. Iowa State wins. Emotional game for both teams. They both came back from that Ireland trip, and neither one of them took a bye week last week, which I thought was odd. Just kind of an odd bit of scheduling, not to take a week off after traveling so far. Iowa State, it did not bother them coming back from that win. I thought they might have a little bit of a letdown, a little look ahead to Iowa. No, they won by 50 plus. You know who it did bother? You know who did have a little bit of an Ireland hangover? That's Kansas State. They really struggled against North Dakota. They barely put away North Dakota last week. Kansas State is now 1-7 against the spread in their last 8 games. I think it's safe to say, again, Avery Johnson, one of the biggest recruits in Kansas State history, it's not working. Overhyped, overrated. Kansas State was overhyped, overrated last year. Supposed to be one of the favorites to win the conference. Weren't even close. They don't look very good this year through 2 games. What are they going to do to Army? Plus 17, option team. Army coming off that, they lost outright as a 2-touchdown favorite against Tarleton State. They were up, the Black Knights were up 24-10 in that game, so it's not like that San Jose State game where they lost to Central Michigan as a double-digit favorite, or even like Alabama losing to Florida State as a double-digit favorite, where the underdog really controlled the game and it was never in doubt. Army looked to be cruising until they weren't. Lost in overtime. Now they got to go on the road to Manhattan against a Kansas State team that's 0-2 against the spread. Okay, next we have Western Kentucky plus 7 at Toledo, 7 o'clock game. 2 great mid-major programs here, right? Western Kentucky, another one of those teams, they're playing their 3rd game in 3 weeks. 2 easy wins, 2 wins against the spread against Sam Houston and Northern Alabama, obviously stepping up in class to play a Toledo team that lost but covered the number last week against Kentucky. Toledo, the favorite to win the MAC, as they should be. They brought back their quarterback, their running back, their top receiver. This is a rematch from last year. Western Kentucky was a 2.5-point home underdog to Toledo last year in the non-conference, and they won. They won at home 26-21. So will Toledo be able to get revenge in this game? They are laying a touchdown. They're laying 2.5 on the road. They're laying a touchdown this year against a Western Kentucky team that's off to a good start. Saturday night, Vanderbilt is a pick'em at Virginia Tech. And I slipped and said Sunday because that was the only bad loss I would say that I had over the weekend was I had a 5-unit play on Virginia Tech against South Carolina. They were getting the 8 points. It was 10-8 in the 4th quarter. Virginia Tech was right there. I thought they had a great chance to win the game. They give up a punt return for a touchdown. They give up a long touchdown pass. They don't cover the spread. You know, that's the way it goes. You're not gonna win them all. Now Virginia Tech is back home after that game on Sunday, so kind of a truncated week for them. What are they gonna do here? Are they in a letdown spot? Are they physically beat up from South Carolina? But Virginia Tech is playing with revenge. If you remember correctly, last season, I think they were 13-point favorites. It was right around 2 touchdowns, but Virginia Tech was a 2-touchdown favorite on the road in Vanderbilt, and they lost upright. The legend of Diego Pavia, easily my favorite player in college football. He upset them at home at Vanderbilt. Revenge game for Virginia Tech. Is Vanderbilt going to be a good team in the SEC? I know that sounds ridiculous, but they beat some teams last year. They almost beat Texas on the road. They did beat Alabama. Like, they were pretty good last year. They brought a lot of guys back, including Pavia. Are they going to be good this year? We'll see. Pick game. The number waffling a little bit, going to Virginia Tech -1. We'll see what that number does throughout the week. All right, next we have two games that are similar situations, setups, numbers, everything a little bit. We got Louisiana Tech plus 37.5 at LSU. Louisiana Monroe plus 37.5 at Alabama. Two night games at LSU, Alabama. Does LSU have a letdown after their big win, their big come-from-behind win at Clemson? Do they stumble? Do they struggle? Does the defense take a little step back? They look great last week, gutting out that win at Clemson. Now they're laying nearly 40 points to Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is 6-1 against the spread. In their last 7 games, you have to think that this game means a little bit more to Tech, to the Bulldogs, than it does to LSU. LSU will be fine winning by 31 or 33 points. Are they going to put the pedal to the metal and win by 40 plus? Same thing with Alabama. They lost. Kalen DeBoer needs something good to happen. He needs it to happen quick. He has motivation to go out and win this game 51-7. He kind of needs to win this game 51-7. Back in 2022 was the last time that Louisiana Monroe and Alabama played, and Alabama won 67-3. So again, that's kind of that little bit of apples to apples, Saban to DeBoer, which isn't going great for DeBoer right now. Are they even good enough to cover 37.5 points against a Sun Belt team? Let's start there. Let's not assume that Alabama is. Do they have a letdown because they got boat raced last week by Florida State? So LSU and Alabama, two monster numbers against Louisiana, vocational schools. All right, we got 5 more and I'm done. Hopefully you are finding this interesting. As I mentioned, take advantage of the free 60 down below. Like and subscribe this video if you are enjoying it. I will be back next week to break down more of these college games, matchups, early numbers. Okay, next we have Boston College plus 3.5 at Michigan State. Now, this is a mover. This game opened with Michigan State -3. It's already gone to 3.5. I'm seeing some 4s starting to pop up. The public is taking a position. The early action is taking a position here on Michigan State. How high is this number going to go? We'll see. After that, we have Arizona State -6.5 at Mississippi State. Okay, Big 12 SEC right here. Arizona State, you don't need me to tell you about them. Okay, they're number 10 in the coaches poll, number 12 in the AP. Playoff team last year, top seed last year. You know all about Arizona State. Why are they laying less than a touchdown on the road here against an unranked Mississippi State team? Number was exactly the same last year, Arizona State -6.5, when they were at home against Mississippi State. They won 30-23. Had a little bit of trouble shaking this Mississippi State team. Who is this Mississippi State team? Who are these masked men? They are 7-2 against the spread in their last 9 games. And this was one of the few that I got wrong for a 1-unit loss. I had Southern Miss plus 13.5 against Mississippi State last week. Weird game, right? Like Mississippi State going on the road against an in-state school in much lower conference than them. I thought this would be a Super Bowl game for Southern Miss. Honestly, Mississippi State handled it with no problem. That game was really never in question. Are they going to be a live home dog? Is this number going to come down? Is the public going to take a position on top 10 Arizona State? Stay tuned. All right, we have UCLA -2.5 at UNLV. Nico Yamavalea, I think I was close on that one, was okay, but UCLA got spanked by Utah. 4-unit winner for me last week with Utah in an absolute blowout. UNLV was able to rebound after their pretty gross performance in week 1 against Idaho State. They had no problem with Sam Houston State. This had to have been a game that they circle. They don't get former Pac-12, current Big Ten teams to wander into Las Vegas to play them very often. Is UCLA even any good? They were a little feisty last year, but they didn't look very good against Utah. Let's just put it that way. We have Stanford plus 18.5 at BYU. BYU wins 16-0. Stanford, now they went to Hawaii, lost on a last-second field goal, kind of gave that game away. They did take a bye week last week. So what does Frank Reich have up his sleeve? against this BYU Cougars team that has been really money, punching down. They really have like taken teams like Stanford, these double-digit 20, mid-20 spreads. BYU has had no problem against numbers like that. Are they going to be able to just run Stanford off the field? Then last but not least, one of the best games on the board, Michigan plus 5.5 at Oklahoma. Another marquee game on the Saturday night slate. Bryce Underwood versus John Mateer. Underwood looked good last week. Michigan didn't cover, weren't ever even really close to covering, but they're still working some things out. They lost a lot to the NFL and to graduation over the last 2 seasons. Still a very good team, though. What are they going to do at Oklahoma? And who are the Sooners? Is it a bounce back year for the Sooners? Is it the end for Brett Venables? Should this guy just never have been a head coach? Is he just kind of a Peter Principle guy who's great as a defensive coordinator but can't build a program? Statement game for Oklahoma. Is this number too high? We got a reverse line movement. This number opened with Oklahoma minus 4.5. Majority action coming in on Michigan. Not surprising, especially when you look back last week on all the biggest games, or the majority of the biggest games. The underdog was the play last week, right? Even in the case of Ohio State, where they were favored, overwhelming majority of bets went in on Texas. They were favored by number only. Like the underdog teams, even on the road last week. Like we talked about LSU going to Clemson and winning. Miami at home, win as an underdog against Notre Dame. Florida State, win against Alabama. And a lot of these big marquee games last week, the underdog was the play. And in Ohio State's position, the disrespected favorite. So it's not surprising that Michigan has taken a majority of the action. What is a little surprising is that the number's going the other way. Is it going to continue to move? Are the sharps going to get in here and push this number down on Michigan? So we will see. So, all right, that's our weekly college football opening line report. Again, hopefully you found some of this information helpful. Hopefully I've given you some tips and tricks. Put some games on your radar, some numbers to watch this week to see if they continue moving the way that we think that they're going to. And then hopefully that'll help you make some intelligent bets later this weekend. Be sure to check out my next video, our NFL opening line report, as well as several others that I have coming, a top 25 report, SEC and Big Ten breakdown, which may start next week. Thursday is Doc Sports Football Release Show, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, right when the picks go live at Doc Sports. We are live on the Doc's YouTube channel with several handicappers breaking down picks, games, free plays, questions, anything that you want. So a lot of good stuff there. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join me. Carpe diem and good luck.